Hey, how's it? So, I'm a beginner gardener. I've grown potatoes from absolutely nothing, literally like from scraps. And yeah, I just want to take you guys on the journey. It seems like they're one of the probably the easiest set it and forget it sort of crops. Um, yeah, let's chat about potatoes. Okay, so if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that I really dig trench composting. And that's really what I started with, what I've been continuing with over the past almost 2 years now. And that's really where my potatoes come from. I never actually planted potatoes. So what I did, right? Obviously I did the trench composting and all that. I knew that I wanted to expand into certain areas of the garden, so I, in preparation for that, trench composted and all that sort of stuff. In the first season, I noticed actually really quickly that there was something popping up, and I'm not talking about the gem squashes and stuff, but I noticed that something had popped up. Didn't really know what it looked like or what it was. Well, it was quite a bit of a strange looking leaf. I had a chat with one of my family members and they said, oh no, it's potatoes. Take it out because you're always going to have potatoes growing here. So if you want this to be potato patch, then leave it, otherwise chuck it out. So that's what I did. I snipped it off because I didn't really want potatoes growing in a random spot in my garden, and that sort of happened a few times. Eventually in the first season, it was probably towards maybe the start of the new year, 2024, I eventually put them in a grow bag. So I literally just used a Woolies bag, reusable bag, and I'm reusing it once again for my beans. But yeah, all I did is I put in some potting soil, a bit of compost and stuff. I'm sure I've got a bit of photos. I mean, you can see it's literally a Woolies bag, really. So yeah, I chucked in, I think it was maybe 2, maybe 3 potatoes initially, and I let them grow up. I had them in this spot here because it gets quite a bit of sun, and I found that it dries out very quickly, so it wasn't very good. But I didn't really get a harvest, some very small things. Unfortunately they got decimated by that massive hailstorm that we had, but yeah. So that was pretty much my first season of growing potatoes. It was an unmitigated failure. And then coming into season 2, once again I had not really planned to grow potatoes. It again just sort of happened. Everything grew from scraps. And it is also worth mentioning that this little area behind me here, this is where I had those sprouts initially in the first season before I started growing them in the grow bag. And once again, it looks like I didn't do a good job at whatever was here, removing them, because I got more potatoes. But this time I left it. Essentially I wanted to just see what was going to happen because I didn't really have a plan for this little area. It doesn't get a lot of sun. It gets, at the height of summer, it gets maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 hours of sun, but it's not even over the entire area. You can see right now it's like 7:30, right? I've got a bit of sun here in the corner here, but this area then gets shaded out for most of the day. Then sort of 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock, then it gets a bit of sun, then there's shade again. So it's not really a good growing spot. But I decided to leave it in the interest of science, just to see what was going to happen. And I got some very interesting things to show you. So eventually I had potatoes growing in this whole area here. And again, I left them. I didn't fertilize with compost or anything. The only fertilization that was done here was all the trench composting. Now I will admit I have done quite a bit of trench composting here. I would say that I've dumped maybe the total of an actual wheelbarrow over the course of a year in this area. So what is left, right? I don't really know how many vines grew here. I will find that out now when I start excavating. But you can see I've got one vine that's growing out here with some potatoes. There's potatoes there. And you can see how long these vines actually grow. They've grown from, I think they sprouted in about October. It is now the end of April, so it's a bit of a long growing crop. And what I noticed in, I think it was February, they started developing these, so these vines, they produce berries, right? Remember, they're part of the nightshade family, so these are essentially kind of like tomatoes, but they do have a lot of solanine in it, so that is toxic. Do not eat them. It's not going to kill you if you eat a single berry, but it could probably make you very, very sick. Yeah, and then it's an interesting note, right? This can then be utilized to then grow potatoes from seed. So I can then harvest these and then try and grow potatoes from seed in the next season, which is something that I actually want to do. But yeah, it's very, very interesting to know. I didn't have any sort of support or trellis or anything. They basically just sprawled across the ground. It's also worth noting, right? Apparently there's two, just like tomatoes, you get two types of potatoes. You get determinate tomatoes and indeterminate tomatoes. Just like, what did I just say? I mean potatoes. But it's the same as tomatoes, so replace tomatoes with potatoes. Potato. But yeah, so that means that some potato varieties, they will only grow to a fixed size. However, other potato varieties, the indeterminate varieties, will grow indefinitely, provided that it has enough nutrients, sunlight, adequate temperatures, adequate moisture, and it does not get like a killing frost or anything. So I suspect, right, because this is the first time I'm sort of growing potatoes, but intentionally, I suspect then if you are going to be hilling up your potatoes, you want to use the indeterminate varieties, because the determinate varieties are not going to grow taller, so you might not get a bountiful harvest that you expect, rather than try and go for an indeterminate variety. Something else I actually did forget to mention, all these potatoes that have grown here from scraps, it's scraps from store-bought potatoes. So yeah, this, I don't even know what variety it is. It's a potato, bro. So we'll see how this goes. So I've spoken about sun, I've spoken about fertilization. Now let's start talking a little bit about water. This area is actually the lowest spot in my garden. Therefore, when it rains, it gets a lot of water. It stays wet for a very long time, which isn't really something that you want for a root crop, because then it's always saturated. It could then be prone to rot. So this is going to be very interesting to find out what these potatoes look like. This latter half of summer and now even autumn, this first part of autumn, has been unseasonably wet, and the cold has also set in a little bit sooner. So I'm really hoping that when I do excavate all these potatoes out, I'm not going to find a lot of like rotten potatoes and stuff. So we'll see about that. But before that, when we didn't have a lot of rain, all I did is I watered it just like with my tomatoes and stuff, about twice a week, just to make sure that the vines don't die off, that they still look nice and fresh and healthy and they're vigorous. So I wouldn't say that they require a lot of water, but they are susceptible to rot if there is too much moisture within the soil. So you do want to watch out for that. And then I have mentioned a few times that I have very clayey, salty soil. This area, being trench composted, it is a little bit aerated, a little bit tilled, a little bit less compacted and dense than other areas of my garden. So it's going to be interesting to see how the size of these potatoes in relation to my heavy clay soil. Now it's not like super clay soil, but it is going to be interesting because there's a lot of pressure on those root crops. So with what I'm trying to say is, when you do grow them intentionally, you do want to make sure that the soil is nice and friable and it's nice and fluffy enough to enable the roots to develop properly and to enable the spuds to develop properly, and to not put undue pressure on those spuds to prevent development of those spuds. That's what I'm trying to say, in a very roundabout fashion. So yeah, that's really what I've done. Not much. I've just basically kept the plants alive. Otherwise, they've done what they need to. They've now died off, and they have been essentially curing in the soil for about 2-3 weeks. I actually wanted to kill them off and let them cure about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago when I did the update video. But because of all the rain that we've had, I have not done that, just to make sure that the plants are still alive, they're still soaking up moisture, just to try and make sure that I don't have any rotten root crops in the soil. So, like I said, water is potentially going to be an issue, but we're going to find out. Okay, so there's a few very interesting findings that I need to discuss. So, potatoes, I mentioned that they're part of the nightshade family, right? Because of that, you can actually splice them with tomatoes and you get what's called a potato. You don't get a new fruit or anything. Literally what you do is you will take the stem of your potato plant, you will splice on a tomato plant, an indeterminate tomato variety. You could probably do it with a determinate variety as well, but normally I see people doing it with indeterminates. But essentially what will happen is then you'll have the root crop, right? You'll have the potato under the ground, and then you'll have the fruiting crop above ground. So, like I said, you won't get a hybrid fruit or anything. You will instead get 2 harvests per plant. The only thing that I don't know, right, is whether you will then end up sacrificing part of your harvest, i.e. have a lower yield per plant because now it's doing 2 things at the same time. So there's a few things that I need to experiment with, and I definitely want to try growing tomatoes. You might end up having to fertilize the area a little bit more heavily because you're growing 2 crops. You might have to water it more often because, again, you're growing 2 crops, so it might be more thirsty. But it's a very interesting experiment and something I definitely want to try out. However, with that said, I mentioned that the berries from a potato plant, they are toxic. They contain a compound called solanine, and you don't want to try those. So if you do have tomato plants, please ensure that you know which are your tomato plants and which are your potato plants. You don't want to chow a cherry tomato thinking or you don't want to chow one of these little potato berry bras thinking that it's a tomato. So just from a safety perspective, you do want to make sure you know which crop is which crop. Now, with that said, tomatoes, they are susceptible to blight, just like with tomatoes. The only difference is you want to watch out with your potatoes and your tomatoes, right? The disease is transferable. So if you find out that your tomatoes or your potatoes end up having issues, disease, powdery mildew, blight and stuff, you might want to move them. Don't plant them in those spots because it is transferable. So you do want to make sure that you sort of keep your plants in a proper space, meaning that you need to then crop rotate them out. Okay, so and because you get those 2 types of potatoes, determinate and indeterminate potatoes, they also have adventitious roots, meaning provided that there's enough moisture against the stems, they will produce roots. So that's why then indeterminate tomatoes, you want to heal them up, right? Because then the stems will then have consistent moisture and heat, and then it'll send out roots where you can then get more potatoes from. So that's actually how that works. The indeterminate tomatoes, adventitious roots, heal them up, more roots, more potatoes, and yeah, you can see how just more potatoes. This is a very weird video. I'm all over the place. Potatoes really. Alright, and then the next finding. So if you take a look here, right, I've got some potatoes that's above ground. Now these ones are looking pretty good. However, these ones here, this one in particular is looking quite green. So why does this happen? This is because this spud right here is starting to produce chlorophyll in order to photosynthesize. The compound for that is sort of resulted from this, again, is toxic. You always hear people saying, oh no, you can't chow green potatoes and stuff, but just like the berries, it does require a bit of it does need to build up. But I mean, oh fuck, I can feel this one's rotten, dude. Oh no. Well, that happened. crap. Yeah, I was worried about this, dude. Yeah, so that's a fail. Failure. Okay, but anyways, yeah. So what I was saying is, these potatoes, green potatoes, you can eat them. Just don't eat a lot of them. The toxin does need to build up over time. However, it does influence the flavor. And oh jeez, dude, this is getting fucking disgusting, bro. Yeah, potatoes, bro. I knew it. I'm gonna have an issue with freaking moisture, bro. Oh yeah, that sucks. Okay, so what am I going to be doing going forward? At this point in the video, you might have seen my harvest yet. I actually don't know how I'm gonna do that yet, but I suppose that's irrelevant. I don't really know how this harvest is going to go, but what I do want to do in the next season is I actually want to dedicate a specific growing area for the potatoes, and likewise for the sweet potatoes, but we'll discuss that at some other point in time. I have a lot of pellets still in my yard that I had for a different project that I haven't been able to deal with. So what I'm going to do, right, just like with my compost bins, I'm going to take 3 pellets, stack them in a block formation. I will have to cover the front as well. And then this area right here, that's where I'm going to put them. Here's the idea. I'm going to put 2 of them next to each other. One is going to be for potatoes, one for sweet potatoes. The idea is that this area, 1, gets a lot of sun. 2, by having so just under a meter cube, probably like 0.8 or whatever it is, of a meter cube, I'm going to then start laying soil. I'll then be able to plant about 5 potatoes in there if I consider the spacing that I had over here. The general spacing I'm thinking about is about 400 moles apart from each other, so it'll be corner, 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 center. That'll be the first layer. Right? Then I'll put down some more soil and fertilize it heavily with compost, because being an indeterminate nightshade variety, I want them to sort of grow their nice luscious green growth very quickly, so that I can then heal up those stems, and then I will then have a second and potentially a third layer as well, where I'm going to do the same. So then I'll potentially have maybe 3 layers of 5 potatoes each, so potentially 15 potatoes in a meter squared, slightly less than a meter squared. Getting a lot of sun, being raised, I should be able to at least prevent any issues with moisture, potential moisture. I would be able to heat up the soil quite easily. I don't know what the soil temperature is required for potatoes, so that's going to be something that's going to be interesting. If they do require a cooler soil, I can always wrap it with a top or something, but then at least I'll have sorted out potential moisture issues. I will have a dedicated spot with a lot of sun, and it's going to be very interesting. Now, why do I want to do this instead of growing in the ground? I've mentioned the moisture, but the main thing is actually for ease of harvest. By putting it in an above ground container that can be disassembled easily, I can then just take off a side, everything will spill out. There's my potatoes, bro. So that's sort of what I want to do, try and make my life a little bit easier. And then again, it'll be nice and easy to just reassemble it. Because the problem is, in ground, right, you have to get it out of the ground. And how are you going to do it? You're going to dig. So by digging, you don't really know where all the potatoes are, so you run the risk of then damaging your crop. So yeah, it's just a little bit of an awkward thing. So I'm going to try and grow them above ground in some form of a container, and this is going to be the perfect spot for that, in my opinion. The other nice thing about growing them in this specific spot, but ultimately it can be applied to any area. I have this railing here, right? So by having these growing containers here, I can then sort of support and vine, support the vines up the containers, up the handrails, up the posts here. I think it'll look kind of interesting, but it's also, again, just for ease of access to the sun, try and give them as much sun as they need. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention.
Alright, so in terms of harvest, I've got a bit of an issue. I've dug this area up now. I actually don't know how many vines are growing here, and I think I've lost a few. I don't know. They might even be growing amongst the basil, nasturtiums, and the rocket. Dude, I don't know. But I found only 2 vines, and this is what I got. So in terms of fruits, this is, I don't know, bro, probably about 100 grams, but obviously this is toxic. You're not gonna chow this. But I'm gonna harvest these, I'm gonna ferment them so I can at least try and grow some potatoes from seed. And then this is what I got from the 2 vines that I did find. So I showed you guys this one just now. It's quite sad. Got a very nice size here, and you can see how this has been nicked. I suspect, because of how this has been nicked, how it looks, I think this is actually one that has grown last season, maybe, and sort of overwintered and then produced all of this, which is a little bit of a sad crop, I'm not gonna lie, really. But yeah, fortunately I only have, well, this one big one that rotted. I found a few smaller ones round about this size that rotted. I mean, like even this one, you can see it's been, I nicked it. This is why I don't want to grow in ground, because it's a little bit risky. And then this one, I found a massive worm on this just now, so I don't know if it's been burrowing in this or what it actually looks like. But yeah, this is my potato harvest. I don't know why the fuck I said that like that, but yeah, this is my potato harvest. A little bit of a sad potato harvest, but again, this grew from scraps. Pretty much no effort involved. If I can just refine this process, prevent them from rotting due to excessive moisture, grow them outside, I think I can definitely do better than this. Definitely, no questions about it. I want to try and grow these little dudes, these things from seed. Yeah, this is my potato harvest, my sad little potato harvest.
Okay, so with this little harvest, I don't really know what to call it. It's not really much of a harvest. I don't really know how many vines was growing. I couldn't find them all. I know there was more than 2 vines, but I can't really find the origin. So I suspect they were growing amongst some of the other stuff that I don't really want to uproot. So I'm gonna leave those. But out of the 2 that I did get, I probably got about 200 grams, around about that way. But quite a few of them are damaged. So even what I did have harvest, I can't utilize. And then at least there's only that one big one that's rotted due to moisture. And I found a few like small ones that rotted. I'm a little bit surprised. But yeah, considering that these all grew from scraps, I pretty much put in absolutely no inputs. There was no fertilization to this area except for the initial trench composting. Well, the multitudes of trench composting to that area. I don't think it's really too bad. If maybe I was a little bit more diligent in finding the points of origin, I could have actually found everything. Considering as well that it is the lowest point, it really wasn't really the right place to grow everything. But again, it wasn't planned, it happened, I left it just to see what's going to happen. So I think overall it's been interesting to see what I managed to get with the lack of input, the lack of foresight, the lack of any general planning or input or fertilization. I think it's kind of interesting. So from here, all I need to do is actually grow them with intent, prepare the area beforehand, ensure that they don't get waterlogged. Then I think I should be able to have actually a pretty decent harvest in the future. Yeah, I really harvested more worms than anything else, but such is life, I suppose. So yeah, potatoes are pretty easy to grow. I'm a beginner gardener, haven't really been gardening for very long. They grew from literal scraps by themselves. They kept themselves alive. I gave them a little bit of water every now and then. Yeah, I don't really know what to say too much. I don't have much experience growing them. But I mean, if you're limited with space, try and grow them in a container. Try and grow them in try and couple them with tomatoes, splice them up, then at least you can try and get 2 crops. So there's a lot of stuff that we can try and do with potatoes, and I really recommend trying to grow them. We'll also see how they compare in terms of flavor, but that's a separate thing. So yeah, so that's the video. Very different to the other stuff. This is completely sort of like unscripted, all over the place. My thoughts are just everywhere. It's more just because this actual crop wasn't really planned. I just decided to see what was going to happen. I thought I'd share that little journey with you guys, because again, I think gardening should be fun. It shouldn't all be planned out to the T. Yeah, everybody has their gardening style and stuff, but I think sometimes we should just experiment and have a bit of fun with it. And that's really what this is all about. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know if it was informative. Hopefully at least it was entertaining. And yeah, if you guys enjoy hearing me ramble on about random gardening stuff, I encourage you to check out the other playlist.